Hi, everyone. Welcome to a special Paizo live stream for Lunar New Year. I'm James Case, Senior Designer at Pathfinder, and joining me is...
Eleanor Ferron, Senior Developer at Pathfinder.
Yeah. So we are here to talk about Tian Xia. So I know today is Lunar New Year, and it's also a couple months out to the release of the Lost Omens Tian Xia World Guide. This is our next big project in the Lost Omens line that's going to cover all manner of things related to kind of Asian-inspired folklore, fantasy, and that kind of thing. So the first book we have coming out is the World Guide. Eleanor, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's coming up in this World Guide?
Oh, well, it's going to be big. There's a lot of nations in Tian Xia. This isn't even the equivalent of the inner sea region. This is an entire continent. And so we have a lot of nations jam packed into this book to try and give you a rundown of every nation that you might visit if you travel across the oceans to Tianxia.
Yeah.
And
I think
we've talked about
there's
a few of them before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And
there's 26 in total, and we're also going to have a number of the book also has a number of pieces on some of the new deities and religions, as well as a couple monsters in it. So
mhm.
I guess let's start things off. We also will be joined with just a few of the contributors for the book who will come in to like let us know what their thoughts were. This was a very big project. We had a lot of people. But before that, let's start with our First Nation, which is the region of Bachuan. Eleanor, do you want to tell us what we're looking at and why there are so many ducks?
Because ducks are the best. Ducks are amazing. Everyone should have a swarm of ducks. Um, but this is Bachuan. There are ducks because this is a rural region and a lot of agriculture in Asia, East Asia, Southeast Asia, has ducks as pest control. Um, and so I wanted to see. You sometimes see like these pictures of a horde of ducks crossing the paved streets in China, and every single time I see those pictures, they delight me. So here are some rural ducks. Here are some very colorful people meeting with some less colorful people. And the reason for that is due to some of the changes that Bachuan has been facing. We
Yeah,
talked about this nation before in a previous stream. Um, to get into some more specifics about some of these changes, Bachuan was convinced to open up the nation to foreign investment, and one of the biggest foreign investors was the sorceress Hao Jin, who returned after being presumed dead for a long
yeah.
time. And
We
with
had
her
a
came, yeah,
Yeah. I know. Hao Jin's been around a long time. She was in Lost Omens Legends. She was a feature in the Fist of the Ruby Phoenix Adventure Path. And she has been storing a lot of people's culture, in some cases, large aspects of the nearby geography into her tapestry. And so Bachuan is a region where you see the return of a lot of these people kind of who have been plucked out of the timeline for one reason or another. Sometimes it was to avoid a large natural disaster, sometimes it was for safekeeping, that sort of thing.
yeah.
Um,
So you might be wondering, lady, why Bachuan of all places? Well, it turns out Hao Jin has a dragon friend in the region, and that dragon friend owes her a big favor. So she is has asked this dragon friend to be the guardian and caretaker of these displaced people, so they can sort of remake their lives in this new Tianxia. Um,
and I think we
and
have another piece of art kind of about of the Tapestry Town, which is one of the areas where you see a lot of this admixture.
Yeah, you have a lot of disparate cultures from this tapestry, and they don't have a lot in common beyond their history at the tapestry. But considering they've all been plucked out of time, that's actually a pretty big connecting factor. So they all decided they were going to get together and make this place called Baifen, the Tapestry Town, and that's sort of like a central hub where you can go and try and talk to some representative of all these disparate tapestry people. And it's a very colorful place. It's got a lot of disparate influences on it. It's very interesting, and historians are flocking there, of course, because these are cultures that people thought went extinct or have been changed so much that a lot of their history was lost. And now suddenly they pop up out of time and reappear. There's a lot of mirror to New Thassalon for that. We've
Yeah.
lost so much of the backstory here, and suddenly these people who have lived it, or at least their ancestors did, showed up.
That kind of brings us to something that's really cool about Tianxia. It's a very old continent, the note of the history goes back really far, and it's cool to get to dive into it. But on that note, why don't we start to take a look at one of the regions that we haven't really seen so much in? And for that, we'd like to bring in one of our first guests, Grady Wang. So we will be talking about Chu Ye. Grady, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me here. My name is Grady Wang, and um, I guess I'm I, I kind of started working in the industry as a co-founder of a YouTube channel called The Gallant Goblin that's kind of about reviewing various TTRPG products and accessories. Had a little background in writing and this was actually the first freelance assignment I'd ever gotten from Paizo because James kind of put out a call for um, writers from of Asian descent or associated with that culture, and personally, my family immigrated here from Taiwan, but had a lot of kind of different cultural mixes. My mom's side is from Tainan in Taiwan, and my dad's side is from Hangzhou in China, and they left during World War II, and then my parents actually met in Taipei. So yeah, so there's a kind of a lot there, and
And with all that, we asked you to write about just monsters. So why don't we talk about your section, which is Chu Ye? I think we have a picture of the opener here that will really
Set the scene.
set the scene for it.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
what is Chu Ye about?
So it's yeah, so monsters, but kind of more than that. I think going back to kind of the first edition, the story there for Chu Ye was it was originally part of the Longhua Empire, and when the Dragon Empire fell, shortly thereafter, suddenly a lot of people living there turned out to not be humanoids but be Oni, and they kind of they revealed themselves and had like a big rampage across the nation, and eventually ended up conquering the nation. And of course, with all the chaos from the empire falling, there was really no one to respond to that, and Chu Ye was kind of left on their own. And so now today, it is a nation that is in essence governed by Oni. And I think that kind of that set up a lot of interesting kind of very I felt like epic kind of scenarios there, where it's a lot of like the people people versus the spirits kind of you're there the Oni are very hedonistic because they came from they were originally kami spirits, right? And they were supposed to be good guardians, and at some point they failed their mission and were kind of stripped of their power, but they were so angry or so greedy that they eventually manifested this other form. And even though they kind of hate humanoids, they also are very jealous of them for being able to be born with this physical form, and they feel like they don't properly appreciate the physical pleasures of life. And so there's this conflict there. So yeah, I was able to kind of draw a lot kind of from um the stories that I had heard from my parents about kind of our cultures, but also kind of drew on a lot of kind of films that I had seen growing up that kind of drew on these themes of like rebellion and 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 kind of spiritual
Yeah. I think we have
questions.
yeah, I think just first of all, before we move, I really like the sort of frame that you really get the hedonism across. I think Eleanor, did you put in this art order? Because it's like you're kind of just like on the table, and it's a very like
yeah. Actually, just like as a bit of backstory, I asked for an Oni banquet, and I got like these really polite, nice Oni having a delightful looking banquet. I'm like, no, 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 you need to make it worse.
make
I'm
it
so sorry to you, artists, but you need to make it
make it
worse.
worse. But yeah, let's go to the next slide because I think that this shows some of the inhabitants of Chuye and who maybe have various feelings on, the shape-changing evil spirits that run the place.
I
Yes,
hate it when my neighbors turn out to be evil shape-changing Oni.
um yeah, so yeah, a lot of these are I think a lot of this art is depicting various folks in the rebellion, as you might imagine, with one of them carrying a severed head. But yeah, the kind of there's the society, because kind of part of the complication with Oni is that they still are having to kind of follow certain rules governing their existence, and so a lot of Chu Ye's actually has been kind of molded by the Oni in their image, um, without kind of directly enforcing edicts on the population.
Mhm.
And so James had kind of told me, like, life there is really bad, and kind of come up with kind of various scenarios that might fit this framework, along with kind of the greed and hedonism of the Oni. And I kind of briefly responded just like, oh, so like maybe late stage capitalism. But and so yeah, there's kind of, it draws on, like, I think like there's like a little bit of a like a Hunger Games influence there, where like, because the Oni like to eat people too, and so they kind of like challenge people to to survive and hunt against them, but they kind of look for volunteers. And there's a lot of people who, because life is so difficult and it's so hard to make a living and survive, that they end up kind of volunteering for this because there's like a reward if they survive, or a reward for their family for getting involved. And so a lot of this becomes kind of the stratification of people competing against each other for the favor of the Oni, and for just a kind of a slice of the wealth that they control. And that ends up kind of being shaping a lot of the culture and life there. But then of course you have a lot of folks, especially kind of more outside the cities, where there's less Oni, who are driving this rebellion, where they're trying to take back the country and expel all these evil shape-changing spirits that are among them.
Yeah, I think this is also a bit of a thing here where somebody is commenting on the ears on the left, and I think Kitsune are also a lot here, and there's a whole bit of like
Kitsune
shape changers
Samsarans, I
versus
believe.
other
Yeah.
shapeshifters.
Yes, absolutely. Because yeah, I mean, no one else is immune to it's Oni versus everyone else in their eyes, and
Mhm.
so everybody kind of suffers. The Kitsune suffer from being kind of seen as rare, and so it's kind of this specialty for them, and so they, it's something different from the humans around. There's also like the Samsarans, because they're right on the border with Ziha and all that too, and the Samsarans actually play a role in kind of helping the rebellion preserve some of the cultural knowledge through kind of the reincarnations they have and things like that as well.
And one specific kind of cultural thing that is not so much related to Chia, but we were really happy to have you work on, is sort of the reexamination of medicine in Tian Xia. This is an area that you're going to see kind of like the take on the elements, where it looks very different from how it does in the inner sea region. So I think we have a picture here of a medicine seller and maybe his helper. Do you want to talk just a little bit about kind of the sort of stuff that went into this?
Yeah, so yeah, and I was really excited when I saw also that, like, because prior to the Oni situation, Chu Ye was actually known for a lot of healing arts and things like that. So there is actually kind of a tie there too. And so a lot of this elemental medicine, which kind of drew upon my personal experiences with like traditional Chinese medicine, and a lot of that kind of originated from Chu Ye as well. But yeah, so kind of growing up, I had a lot of illnesses as a kid, like a lot of sinus infections, a lot of kind of just chronic issues that um, a lot of medicine couldn't solve. Like they just kept prescribing me antibiotics, and at some point my parents were like, this isn't working. It's just they're just trying the same thing over and over again. And so so they were a little hesitant to try things that weren't necessarily scientifically proven in the West and things like that. But they were like, there's this very long tradition of different medicines, like acupuncture and then traditional Chinese medicine, which is a lot of different kind of herbs and ingredients preparations, that are kind of meant to heal in a different way. Like a lot of it is based around kind of reinforcing your health, generally building up your immunity, eating well, rather than targeting like a specific symptom or a specific illness. And so it's kind of one of those like, gradually build up your health and hope, and maybe that will resolve some of your other chronic health issues as well. And so they took me back to Taiwan, looked for all sorts of doctors. And like, for me, like I didn't love it because the medicine tasted really bad.
I've had compo, which is a little similar, and I'm like, this is very bitter.
Yeah, there's a lot of different tastes depending on the ingredients that go into it. But it was also kind of really cool because it's like brewing potions in a lot of ways. Like for a lot of them, like the efficacy of the medicine, the idea is, like how it's not just the ingredients you use, it's how you prepare it. Like, are you drying it? Are you leaving it out in the sun versus like heating it over a fire, right? And different and like different ingredients will interact with each other differently. The environment you're in, kind of like baking macaroons. If it's too humid, it won't turn out well. Things like that. And so I was kind of able to draw on that and make it kind of very lore heavy, tie it into the elemental cycle. For that in Tian Xia, there's kind of a different set of elements than the kind of the traditional Western take on it, and kind of how those elements interact. There's kind of idea that like certain ones will complement each other, like and like water will help wood grow, and then wood can feed into fire, but fire is like destructive to wood, and so like some will counter each other. And so it was built around kind of giving a framework of how to present maybe even the traditional healing and medicine options in Pathfinder, but reflavor it in a way that makes sense in this other culture. And also I think some of the mechanics of it is built towards that kind of longer term effects. I don't want to go into too much, but
we'll make people wait just a little while longer on that. But but it is very cool. There's a nice little anecdote about Thumbus trying to decide what to treat Hearths with. Well, thank you so much for giving us some of your insights on this. Where can people find you before we let you go?
So I'm mostly under the Gallant Goblin title. So social medias, you find it at the Gallant Goblin on YouTube, or just Gallant Goblin on like Twitter and Blue Sky because it's shorter there. We have a website as well, so you can come check out all of our stuff. We also have a store called HeroPlush.com where we sell little kobolds plushies. Seeing Eleanor with all those reminded me.
Hey, I have one, but it's in the other room. I should have brought him out.
There's themed for different classes. You can everything's swappable, so you can kind of dress them up in different ways. We like cute things as well, which goes great with Chu Ye, of course. But
it balanced things out. Thank you so much for your time.
The things need to be cute for the Oni to eat.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And I think with that, we'll go on to looking at our next region. And for that, let's bring on Hiromi Cota. Let's see here. Hiromi, welcome.
Hi, Tai. One Hiromi Aibin. Yiso Gach debut. Hi, I'm Hiromi Cota. I was just speaking Okinawan, which is a nice segue into I'm Okinawan, as well as Japanese and Yeoman and Mexican and Swedish. I am just sort of most of the boxes on the diversity form.
Is it Haisai or
Haisai? Haisai is the feminine. Haisai is the general greeting. Hai Tai is the feminine. I use both because I'm non-binary, and I just check all of the boxes and ruin everyone's.
I'm just trying to like think back because we do have a lot of Okinawan in Hawaii, and I'm just like, ooh, what did I remember it right or not?
Yeah, you got it.
We'll just get you and James a box that says yes.
There we go.
Well, welcome so much to this stream. Eleanor, what do we have here for Hiromi to talk about?
Got Kwanlai. Let's pull up that Kwanlai picture. It's full of nice artwork. Yep, there we go. We've got a couple non-Tengu, but Kwanlai is mainly the home of the Tengu. And it kind of had a crappy time when Linvarre was in power. It was sort of used as a dumping ground for all of the criminal elements of the empire. and the conditions there kind of sucked. But it's been recovering, sort
Yeah.
of. It's trying.
Yeah.
It's doing its best. I
So
do want to ask Hiromi, what drew you to Kwanlai as something you wanted to write?
The idea of a nation that is Tengu majority and that had sort of a tumultuous slash problematic past with um, the powers that be was kind of a natural draw to me because uh, I'm gonna restrain myself from going on too long of a rant, but Okinawa, Yeeyama, and the rest of the Ryukyu Islands uh, didn't join Japan willingly, and depending on how pedantic slash accurate you want to get, uh, the king didn't surrender. So I sometimes refer to the Ryukyu Islands as unceded territory, sort of mirroring the vocabulary of North American indigenous folks because it's it is a fairly close analog. Uh, like sometimes I'll say that like Okinawa is Japanese in the same way that Cherokee Nation is. Uh, so pulling back from that and not going on a rant.
Well, you know,
uh,
we don't have a set endpoint to this stream.
but in terms of like we have that, but of course we also have a nation of people who are Tengu and that sort of thing. So how did you kind of take those influences into the sort of fantasy world here?
so one of the things that Eleanor touched on was that during the Shu Empire, the or sorry, the Longhua Empire, uh, Empire,
Yeah, Empire.
Longhua, is that they were used as sort of a dumping ground for undesirables. And one of the things I was sort of thinking about that was that um, what happens when you have a nation that is just sort of used as this nexus of everything that the people in charge of the nation don't care about and don't want to have near them. So what you basically have is you have a bunch of revolutionaries and bandits all in one spot, which if they don't like each other, then the problem kind of takes care of itself. And if they do get along, well, then you've just seeded your own downfall, which is kind of what happens. Uh,
Yeah,
the
it's really interesting to see sort of the timeline sort of advance from not only the past, but just, we have a living setting. So, the nations change over time. And it's been about 10 years since we last took a really deep look at Tian Xia. And so you can see a lot of just a lot of the changes to it. I really like this nuance you have here in that they sort of have a different name for themselves
Mhm.
versus what they're called. I think I'm always very interested in language, and that's been a part of sort of Tengu going back a long ways. So tell us about what's going on with the language here.
Yeah, so this is a case where drawing fairly directly from my background, where uh, in the native language of Okinawan, it's not referred to as Okinawa; it's referred to as Uchina. Similarly, Yeeyama is Yaima. Um, and that they're similar to the Japanese names, but different because they're not the same language. They're related, but they're not the same language. So with that, there's Kwanlai, which was a name kind of pushed upon people, but the Tengu have their own endonym of Otoya, which is Japanese for like big roost,
Right.
which I felt was a fairly appropriate name, and it also gives a nice demonym of Otoyan for the people and the adjectival form if you want.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think we have a slide here of Sudarai Gongen, who is this? We're gonna be taking a little bit of a look at.
So Lady Sutarai Gongen is the um, uh, why she is priestess of Heifeng, and she sort of like traveled the globe or Galeran, and uh, she's at this point kind of a mythic figure of both like a wandering divine servant, and now she is also a national leader. Like she is in charge of Kwanlai. Uh, there's there's a council, but like she's the one calling the shots. Like they're that it's a matter of like what is the effective ruler of the nation, and by effective in this case I mean like who's the one who's actually making things happen, who's actually producing the effects.
For sure. And it is that that link with the sort of, there is that strong kind of religious component as well, which I think we're gonna see in our last image from here, which is of Todoro Kaze.
Yeah, this is a temple to Heifeng, Heifeng, depending on which nation you're from, how you want to
Mhm.
pronounce it. As you can see that there's a lot of lightning decorations. There's also a lot of lightning rods. I do recall one sentence that particularly delighted me in your section, that building your building things too high was a challenge to Heifeng, and one that he was all too eager to take up.
Um,
Yeah, don't build too high, certainly not on a mountain.
yeah. I uh I always like the idea of like you have a patron deity, but he's also not the best in some ways. And there's an interesting, it's a interesting dynamic you get in kind of a fantasy world. So I really like that. Well, thank you so much for coming and telling us about it. It's a really cool glimpse into Kwanlai and Tengu, or something that
No, no,
I'm
James. Before we let Hirome go, you promised me that I
ah
could ask
yes.
about the there's a bunch of really interesting pronunciation that you sent us, which I loved
Yeah,
dearly, even though we had to cut out some of it to make it fit into the guide. Now it says Tengu presents some difficult challenges for some, differentiating between C, K, Q, and double K. Can you pronounce all of these on stream for us at home?
sure. So uh they're the difference between them is aspiration and then like point of articulation, with Q and KK being further back in the throat. So um, C ends up being unaspirated, so it's like the C in scar. So like if you put your fingers in front of your mouth and you say scar, you don't get
Sorry.
a big puff of air
Sorry.
from the k. But if you say car, then the air is coming out more forcefully there. Uh, and the same relationship goes on with the Q and the KK. But instead of uh, it's
I think it's interesting in like the fantasy language if you are also thinking about being a bird that
I
way.
I read through your instructions and spent too long that I want to admit to trying to follow them. I don't believe I succeeded at any
Hey,
point.
that's good world building. Hiromi, where can people find you?
I am uh, sort of on Blue Sky as at Hiromi Cota. You can also find me at hiromicota.com, which is where I have my portfolio of all sorts of fun stuff. Um, Also, Monday you can pre-order Uncle Iroh's Adventure Guide, which I
Nice.
wrote one of the adventures for.
Very fun.
Uh, I figured that this audience would probably appreciate Uncle Iroh a little bit.
I certainly would. And I think if you look at the Paizo blog, you may see some fiction from Hiromi coming up pretty soon for Tian Xia. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for coming by.
thanks so much for
Um,
having me.
yeah. So we have one more guest who will be joining us, but unfortunately, as he lives in another time zone, he could not make it live. So we have a pre-recorded segment with Jeremy Blum talking about Linvarre. We'll go into that now. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'm Sigrid, and then
Welcome
Eleanor and I will
to
have a
this
couple
pre-recorded
more
section of our
things to say.
stream. Eleanor and I are here with our third and final guest, Jeremy. So, Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jeremy Blum. I'm a TTRPG freelancer, and the Tian Xia books were actually my first big project. So yeah, it's great to be here. It's good to be talking about them, and it's excited to finally reveal some of the stuff I've had to sit on for a very long time because we worked on
Yeah.
this. We worked on this it's been like 2 years at this point. So yeah, it's been a
Yeah.
while.
This project had sort of an above average lead time just because of how big it was, and then we had
Yeah.
to reschedule it. So it is really cool and it's coming out soon. Uh, Eleanor, what section are we talking about today?
We're talking about Linvarre, which most people from first edition might recognize as Amanandar, a former Taldan colony.
Yeah, and Jeremy, it was great to have you on to take this section. Do you want to just give us a little bit of an intro into like what is Linvarre?
Yeah, so the idea was to recast Amanandar from first edition and to kind of change the narrative ever so slightly. Instead of just having it be this colony that was created by a foreign nation that set up shop in Tian Xia. Now it's a bit easier. It's not the first successor state that you see in the Tian Xia book. It doesn't lead at the top of the alphabet anymore. And I think Amanandar, however you want to call it, it was one of those countries in first edition Tian Xia that was kind of like, you know, even if you weren't that familiar with the material, everybody kind of knew of this Taldor colony somewhere in Asia that was basically kind of like maybe Hong Kong, but it really had this white savior veneer to it. And I think my job was to kind of recast that and change that a little bit while not breaking existing lore. So in first edition lore, you had General Opheria Amanandar. It's another mouthful. She founded Amanandar by dragging a bunch of soldiers over from Taldor, and then they set up shop right in the middle of the continent, which is a very interesting place to set up shop. And then they kind of saved locals from bandits and were allowed to create a nation there. We kind of changed that so that, yeah, she and her army still sailed to Tian Xia, but instead of just being the saviors that swooped in at the last moment and saved the people, there was an ongoing war in that section of the map between a bunch of bandit lords, and there was an alliance from Tianjing and Ziha in the area already. So we have Celestial Touch, we have Samsarens there, and they kind of allied with these Taldor foreigners, and then afterwards, this nation Amanandar was founded. And then we fast forward a little bit to the current era where, Taldor is kind of this crumbling empire that its glory days are long gone. And you have this colony over in Tian Xia that is being taxed by an empire all the way across the globe, and people are calling for independence. So we have the country declare independence in 7,220 IC, and it takes on a new name called Linvarre, which is a name composed of two words. Lin is the word for lotus in Tian, and Var is an old Chaldean word for kingdom. And so Linvarre is the kingdom of the reborn lotus. And the idea is that it's a couple generations in now. You have a whole bunch of mixed race people wandering around, like there's Taldors, there's Chaldean people, and there's Tian people, and they've intermarried, and there's all these immigrants exploding in the country right now. And it's really kind of a fresh take on this nation that was really more of just a white savior kind of country in first edition. And I think it's a lot more lived in now, and it's a lot more representative of what it's like to be a mixed race person.
And you can see that in the opening for the Linvarre section, which showcases just sort of this triumphant founding. You have, of course, the Taldans in the center, General Amanandar with the Taldan flag, but of course, off to one of her sides, there's the Samsarans, the blue skin, and to her other side, you can see the celestial touch from Tianjing with the white hair, just sort of showcasing that even though it's considered a Taldan colony, there was already so much of this different Tian influences on it and on its history and how they've continued to influence this nation up until the present day.
Yeah, I love this piece of art. It came out really good, and I think it kind of represents the new multicultural take that we wanted to infuse into Linvarre. We sort of play it straight here. We do
In Tian Xia, where we can say, hey, we'd be from there, we belong there, as opposed to a lot of Asian media settings where we do not.
You know, and much of the goal with the kind of Tian Xia project overall is to look at a very like broad view of Asia and Asian fantasy and that kind of thing. And you do have a lot of places in Asia where that are highly multicultural, that are very global hotspots, you know, where like increasingly one person's parent is from another country or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Jeremy, I really like this section. Like there's a lot of really small things in here that just felt like they rang very true to me. The idea of like a Taltian pigeon is
Yeah,
really
that was influenced by, like, I lived in Hong Kong for 6 years, and so that was influenced by Hong Kong English. But I mean, there's Singaporean English, there's like Hawaiian, you know,
yeah.
the Hawaiian mixed with English. There's so many,
Yeah,
you know,
we
it just Chinglish. Like there you go. That's like spoken by the diaspora.
yeah,
And that's
like
an official language in Linvarre now. There you go.
no, I mean, yeah, like in Hawaii, everybody, you know, like pigeon was a real thing, and I think technically it's a Creole now, but we still all still
Mm,
call it pigeon.
yeah.
But you know, code switching languages in general, like the number of times I've been around a table with, you know, friends who, you know, speak like Japanese and Korean and some English, and they'll just be speaking English and they'll just say a word in Korean or Japanese because they like don't know what it is. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. And I get to a word I don't know in Japanese. I'm like, this word in English.
Yeah,
That's very
that was sort of the spirit of what I was trying to do with Linvarre, to create a nation where code switching is the norm, where seeing someone that looks like somewhat Avastani, but you know, somewhat Tian as well is the norm. And basically, like if you're, you know, all of us on this stream are mixed race. If you're a mixed race person and you've always been grappling with the idea of, oh, am I enough of this race or am I enough of this race? Like what am I? Like Linvarre was sort of created for you in mind. It still is that a country that started as a foreign outpost in fantasy Asia, and it's still kind of grappling with the repercussions of that. Like, you know, we can get into some of the government stuff, but basically, like the government's still ruled by the army, and there's still a lot of problems going on. There's like an indigenous population that they're not treating very well. Shout out to my other collaborator on this, Mac Patak, because he wrote some really good stuff in there that takes inspiration from the Philippines. And Linvarre still has a lot of things to work out, but it's evolved to a degree that it's realistic, and these are real problems and real situations for like a GM to throw at players now.
I think one of the arts we have here is of a Rondolero fighter. So this is like a really good example of that mixed Taldan influence. Jeremy, what was your kind of thoughts going into that?
Yeah, so Rondolero is mentioned a couple times, particularly in first edition and a little bit in second edition as well. But I really thought that it fit well for a nation like Linvarre, which, you know, is full of mixed ancestries. Rondolero itself is described as a buckler and falcata fighting art. that combines peasant dances with the weaponry that was traditionally used by Taldor's nobility. So it makes sense that Linvarre would really take to this fighting style and then adapt it and infuse it with their own fighting proficiencies.
Yeah, I really like that. It's kind of a Talden thing, but there's also a little bit of like a class mixture kind of thing going on there too. That's like
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. I know this was one of the sections where we were really lucky to have Kent Hamilton do some of the in-house concepting of what kind of the look of what kind of the look of Linvarre might kind of be. Eleanor, I know you did like a lot of the kind of artistic stuff here. Do you want to like talk about that? I think we have another piece to the one of the Society of the Five-Spoked Wheel people.
Yeah, you can see a lot of the mixed Talden and Asian influences.
Insignia with that lion on their chest, and you can see the six eyes. And so it's an example of this imagery that was taken from, I guess, the mother country, but then turned entirely Tian and given a new veneer.
It expresses a little differently,
Yeah.
overseas, as it
And
were.
like
We've
the
got an example of the
go ahead.
official with the Society of the Five-Spoked Wheel. You can see the Gros Grisant on their chest, but you can also see they've painted eyes on nobility's forehead, just to sort of emulate the Gros Grisant from Taldor, the mythical lion with six eyes. And if you look very closely at the embroidery, you can see the Talden heraldic embroidery on it. Like you can see on the green tabard in front, like these little three lions next to on one of the patches, and clouds on another one of them, just sort of emulating those noble flags and standards.
Yeah, I really like this take, especially because, lion dance, as I wrote, is popular in Linvarre, but the lions that the performers hold, they resemble the Gros Grisant, because that is a legend from Taldor, from the motherland, that has become transmitted to Linvarre and then cast in a new interpretation that now kind of dictates the formal wear of the nobility and of just the regular people who are doing lion dances in the streets. And those legends are passed on to people in Tian Xia, and so all of the dragons resemble like the great worms killed in Taldor back during the dragon plague, thousands of years ago. So there's a lot of that mixing going on throughout this entire section when we get to culture and history.
Yeah, I really love it. It certainly feels like it's had, a couple generations in world to kind of.
I also, and I'm very proud of this, I have introduced spam to the world of Pathfinder.
Oh God!
It's called twam. It's described as a pinkish meat made from pork that General Amanandar brought over to Tian Xia, and like her troops survived on it during the long boat ride. So there you go, like your spam breakfast noodles, all of your all of your like spam musubi, like there you go. That's probably my most important contribution to this entire game, I think.
You heard it here. Jeremy Blum, first time author, biggest contribution, spam.
Spam.
It's a really cool section. It's certainly one that we wanted to not really remove, but certainly to remake and show how it could kind of come into its own in this. I think it's really cool. Just kind of last thoughts. Is there anything you feel that people need to know?
Yeah, I mean, I
leading up to
think on
release?
that note, like leading up to this project, there were a lot of folks online talking about how Tian Xia could be made a little bit better, and there were some people being like, "Oh, Amanandar should be retconned entirely. Like, let's just throw out the lore from first edition." And I mean that's fair, but I think I'm happy with the way we did it, which is all the lore from 1E still works technically, but it's just heavily from the view of like a Taldane professor or historian viewing this stuff from afar. Whereas now you have this elevated and evolved culture that's really come into its own. And I'm glad that it exists the way that it does now, and I'm happy that I got a chance to work on it, and really psyched for people to see it and start making characters from Linvarre.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for all your work. Is there anything else you're working on? Where can people find you before we kind of go
Yeah,
back to
so
the mainstream?
you can find me on all social media, Twitter, X, Blue Sky, whatever, under the name Pixel Grotto, Pixelgrotto. I worked on Pathfinder How of the Wild as well, so I could say I worked on that. I worked on some other books that I can't talk about for Pathfinder as well, and I am currently, because I live in the UK now, I'm working on some interesting projects with some local UK tabletop makers that will hopefully be coming out soon as well, and
We'll
might
have
be
to
of
keep an eye out
interest.
for those.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, just check me out on social media, and if you end up making Linvarre characters, just at me. I definitely want to hear. I definitely want to hear about it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by with the time difference and everything. We'll look forward to hearing from you a little bit more coming up. But otherwise, let's get back to the mainstream.
In the nation of Shenmin, spirits and monsters stalk the depths of Spectre Wood, and ghost towns outnumber those inhabited by living souls. But this was not always the case. Over 100 years ago, the Age of Lost Omens began in Tian Xia with the collapse of the mighty Linvarre Empire, an event that left the small towns of Shenmin isolated and forced their citizens to become self-sufficient or fall to ruin. Willow Shore was one such town. Founded to support the construction of a remote mountain monastery, Willow Shore soon transitioned over to a lumber town, and like so many others, it was forced to fend for itself in the years after the Empire's fall. Not 2 years later, the records speak of a mysterious curse that fell upon the town, and while details of what took place have been lost to time, the events of Willow Shore's Season of Ghosts will now be told. The Season of Ghosts begins during the first days of summer, and is a time when the unquiet spirits of Spectrewood grew particularly restless. The townsfolk of Willow Shore celebrate this with a night of feasting on the last day of spring, but when a group of heroes wakes the day after, they find their hometown under siege. Fog shrouds the town, and the night sky shimmers under the light of a crimson moon, and monsters now stalk freely through the town's streets. While defending the monstrous invaders and lighting the town's protective eternal lantern could restore Willow Shore to safety, these invaders and strange manifestations are only the beginning, as walls of ghostly shapes rise in the surrounding woods. The town of Willow Shore has become cursed, and its people must band together if they are to survive the coming year and the horrific monsters they will face. Can the town's newest hero save their homes, family, and themselves? Or will the Season of Ghosts mean the end for them all?
All right. Welcome back. Thank you to all of our guests for taking time to tell us about all the cool stuff that they've been working on. Eleanor and I are super excited about this book, and that's just some of the 26 regions in it, and we will be revealing more and more as we get closer to release, so stay tuned. And but this is not the only Tianxia project we have on the horizon. In addition to the Season of Ghosts Adventure Path, which I think you all just saw an ad for, very spooky, very cool. We also have a character guide coming out, which has a lot of interesting player options and rules. So you know, once you've learned about Tianxia and kind of found a place that strikes your fancy for whatever reason, maybe there are some options from there to help bring that character to life within the rules themselves. I know we've revealed 3 of the 6 playable ancestries in this book so far. The Samsarans, who reincarnate, the Tanuki, who are shapeshifting losers, and the Wayangs, who came here from the Netherworld and live in the shadows and stuff. Eleanor, you want to tell us what maybe the 4th ancestry coming out is?
I don't, because as soon as we name these ancestries, people will be sad we didn't get their favorites. But I'll do it anyway.
But they're
So
very
the
cool.
first ancestry of the remaining 3, of which we will announce all, please be patient, is the Sarangai.
Yeah.
Let us see if we can get that picture up here. Now you
Okay.
may feel like they seem very similar to the Minotaur.
Yeah.
but they are
So
not. For one thing, they are smaller than minotaurs. They are human-sized. You might think that they are very small minotaurs. They are not. They are originally from Filipino mythology. Um, they were known to have magical earrings. However, in this case, our Sarangai, both of these are covering their foreheads. And
yes.
that's for a very specific reason, because in Pathfinder, the Sarangai, they do wear the earrings typically, but that's
Mhm.
sort of a decoy from the true power, which is the soul gem they keep in their forehead. And that soul gem, in addition to containing their soul, like you'd kind of guess from the description, it also gives them some magical powers, and they have a relationship with the moon because the crescent of the moon looks like
Like
the caribou horns.
yeah, I
Uh,
really like that, and you can see that their heritages are all named after kind of a different relationship. You know, you have the full moon Sarangai, which is good at healing and wisdom, and you have the new moon Sarangai, who is
who
this is
is
the small
short,
one. This is
short
this is
boy.
the small one,
Yeah, this is the
and they're
small
small
one.
and agile.
They're small and agile and sneaky, and they will shiv you before you notice them. Um,
Yeah. So
and
Sarangai are cool. They have a bunch of magical powers from their gems, and they have a lot of interesting abilities that are inspired by Filipino mythology, and they have a strong connection to the Earth and the Moon.
yeah, they're known to be some pretty intimidating warriors in folklore. I'm looking to see what people do with them. And just to clarify for people at home who may not know what a caribou is, it's a water buffalo.
It's a water
Just
buffalo.
just a yeah, it's not a cow. Well, I guess technically it is a cow, but
It's
they're
a buffalo.
bigger, meaner. Don't mistake one for the other.
Yeah. I like an ability here that they have called Smoke Through Bamboo, which is specific to the new moon one, the small one, that lets them kind of step through some difficult terrain because they're just used to moving through like dense forests and that sort of thing. I think it's a really cool ability. Uh, yeah, so this is the first, and let's just reveal all the ancestries
No,
coming in the
fine,
book.
fine. You do one next. You
Okay.
do it.
So next we have, what is next? Next we have the Yaksha ancestry. Yakshas draw from a number of mythologies. They are basically guardians who came from the first world, and when the first world was essentially abandoned by the gods, they swore vows. So Yaksha Yaksha interact very heavily in the remaster with one of the new things we've done is we've added edicts and anathemas for every ancestry, just to get a sense of like what they believe in and what your values are. If you are a Yaksha, they are the first ancestry who are kind of playing with the system a little bit, where um, each heritage sort of isn't so much like a lineage. It describes the vows that Yaksha swore and that will grant them powers. So you have what's the one on the left we have here? We have, I think it's Deny the Traitor's Rebirth. This is one about confronting Rakshasas and Asuras, because those are essentially their sworn enemies, and this gives them special powers. It makes it easier for them to see through those illusion and like shape-changing disguises, because that's a thing that Rakshasas have always done. And then they also have some abilities here like Howling Aspect. Howling Aspect lets them literally pull their hair into fire and grants them a fiery hair type of attack in this kind of fiercer form. So the kind of absorption of magic and how this powers them in a very like they've sworn a vow to this particular cause and it grants them great power is very cool.
Yeah,
One of my
depending.
little
Mhm. Go ahead.
One of my favorite bits of lore here is that the power of their primordial vows means that they can live for 1,000 years, but because the vows are very dangerous, they rarely don't live longer than a century. Because turns out if you've sworn to confront all Rakshasas everywhere they are, eventually you might
You might
run
get
into,
eaten
yeah,
by
you
a
might get eaten.
Rakshasa.
Yeah.
So the figure on the right, depending on what yaksha lore you look at, they vary wildly. In the case of the yaksha on the left, it kind of looks like a normalish guy with some interesting markings, tattoos, and that sort of thing. Uh, that's how you might typically see them in South Asia specifically. And I know we have another picture in the book which we don't have for the stream. He's just like a guy with a little tubby belly. He's just vibing. He looks really like a guy you'd meet on the side of the road and maybe sit down and have a chat with. However, in Thailand, if you look up what a yaksha is, you will find they look very bitey. To describe it as the author described it, they are very bitey, and that howling aspect is representing the bitey lore that you can find in the real world.
Yeah.
And one of the I think most interesting things about this ancestry from a mechanical side is they are spirits. You will have the yaksha and spirit traits. You will
Yeah.
not have the humanoid trait if you are a yaksha.
And just the
So
way
you
in
might,
which they're very kind of some of these rules from the remaster really allowed us to bring some assumptions that are more true in Asian folklore to life. You know, spirits are not necessarily from another plane. They're not necessarily inherently good or evil aligned. They're spirits. And that is something that some of this new tech, like the spirit trait, really lets us do.
yeah. Um,
And then
if
we have our last ancestry.
we
Let's
have
see.
the Yao guy,
Yeah.
and some of you might hear this as the Chinese version of yokai, and honestly, they are not far off. These
Yeah,
are
it's maybe cognate terms, but the way that they feel is very different. Like these are in similar way, you know, they're animals or plants or even aspects of nature and like the elements that have kind of absorbed ambient energy and gain shape-shifting abilities.
yeah. You'll probably hear stories from all over Asia, South Asia, East Asia, Central Asia. You might hear, this snake pleased the gods and it was uplifted into a human form, or this monster is born out of lightning, or this celestial screwed up super bad and got punished to live as a mortal.
Demoted.
Yeah, and all of those can be represented by the Yao Guai
Yeah.
heritage.
The Yagoi is something very unusual in that each of their heritages is kind of what they were born of. So we see on the left, we have the born of vegetation. I think this one was really a flower tree of some kind, and the one on the right was born of the elements. I think it was literally lightning that awoke. So they have both a humanoid form that gives them maybe some skills relevant to their background. I think the born of vegetation has a bonus to medicine. But then when they transform into their Yagoi form, which they see here, they get different abilities. And so like they have a number of abilities, like Morphic Strike, where they can kind of shapeshift one of their limbs to attack with, and that'll be different depending on whether, if you're born of animal, it might be a claw. If you're born of nature, it's maybe some elemental energy, that kind of thing.
They're definitely going to be very, very disparate. Um, to the point where you might wonder, well, what is a Yao Guai beyond something we call a Yao Guai? But the answer is they use this mechanical chases.
Oh, there we go. I'm sorry, I blipped for a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And
Um,
well, we've got one ancestry adjacent
we have one
thing to go down.
bonus.
Yes,
Yeah.
one bonus. It is a versatile heritage, and a lot of people have been asking about it,
And
especially because the
I
new
think when
game
we
came out.
took 10 minutes to talk about Oni, people maybe got a bit of a hint there. But Eleanor, you want
Yeah,
to tell us
there's
what
a
this
lot
is?
of. Yes, this is the Hunger Seed. It is back, but it is not part of the Nephilim versatile heritages. Oni are no longer fiends, and so the Hunger Seed versatile heritage is its own separate versatile heritage. But with the nation of Chu Ye and really just the whole of Tian Xia, we didn't want to let those part Oni, half Oni characters go by the wayside, and I'm certain we've all had our half fiend, um, not exactly fiend, half ogre. You have things like Yuritsei Yetzer and and that sort of thing to, maybe we just married an Oni or whatever, and now we've got weird half Oni
Yeah.
people running around.
And now that they're their own versatile heritage, we kind of had a little bit more space to really give them very specifically Oni-derived abilities. The heritage gives you those Oni horns because Oni's got to have horns. Um, they
You
have
need to
maybe
hide them.
at higher levels, they maybe have the ability to open a third eye that can, blast out with lightning because that third Oni eye. So they can really get some space to really have their own abilities, and that's really cool.
One of my favorite ones is the Bloodchoke Dash feat, which, if you are below half your hit points, you gain a 10-foot status bonus to all your speeds. So they just go full anime when injured.
Yeah, we kept the Hunger Seed name because it's still what they are, and at the end of the day, Oni are still very hungry, so
Yeah.
it still fits. So that is the all 6 of the playable ancestries coming in the Tian Xia character guide and the one versatile heritage. Um, let's do the last little spoiler, and then we'll maybe have a little bit of time to take some Q&A. But
All right.
I know a lot
I'm
of the
gonna
stuff here
introduce
we've
this one because you have to explain it. we we have an archetype from the character guide called the Starlit Sentinel, and I think as soon as you'll see the picture, you will have some idea of what we're going for here. James, you wrote this. This is your
did.
fault. Explain yourself to the
I mean,
audience.
you put it in the outline. So, yeah. So I know we've been talking a lot about like really old folklore that goes back really far, and we really wanted to pull on all of these influences to find something that's like really true to these myths and the fantasy. But we also know that there's a lot of more popular fantasy that's just as popular and that's a little more recent. And one of them is, of course, this is the Starlit Sentinel. This is our kind of take on the magical girl. Um, Basically, the Starlit Sentinel is empowered by one of the signs of the Tian Xia zodiac, and they can transform into this alternate form, and then they gain, your basic stuff. They can shoot little bolts of starlight. They have unique focus spells they can use only while transformed. And they can use the hearts of their friends to empower their weapons with special runes and that kind of thing.
I hope you mean that like metaphorically, because there's some magical girl animes out there that would use that literally.
No, it is a metaphorical and literal. I don't know. You draw your sword through, harmlessly into your teammate, and then the rune that best describes your personality empowers it. So I don't know, maybe Frost if it's like an elegant mentor, or something like Thundering if it's like a sparring partner who you always destroy everything with, that sort of thing. So yeah, there's a number of archetypes and other playable content coming in the character guide. And there is just an absolute wealth of lore and background and deities and monsters, because we all know that you need to terrorize your PCs with them coming in the world guide. So we're going to have a lot of just a lot of stuff coming up in the next couple of weeks, and we hope that you're all looking forward to it. We have a little bit of time where we can maybe take a couple of questions before we head out. Let me see if I know Rue has been looking at them, and if you
Why
have
is the first question always who my little friends are?
Eleanor, who is your little friend?
I am calling him Jelly Beans currently. He is a jelly bean Lunar New Year dragon plush that I got from the Japanese American Museum in Los Angeles, which my family and I have often visited and been a part of the exhibits because of my family background. And so I highly recommend supporting this museum if you are so inclined. They sell some wonderful teas that support the museum. They sell this cute little jelly bean dragon plush if you want to support the museum. And that is enough shilling for non-related products at this particular moment.
Um, maybe there's one here. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I think Rue can pass a few of them to us. Eleanor, who is your favorite deity in Tian Xia and why?
Oh, that's really hard. I think my favorite deity is Skio, mainly because I have my own mental issues, just like Skio is. And sometimes he just wants to, turn into the new moon and not be perceived. But he still really does his best for everyone out there, including people like me. And that is very close to me personally. Um, but there are some other deities that I like just as Chaos Gremlin GM mode, like Hei Feng.
I was gonna
um,
actually say Lady Jingxi because she gets
yes,
her own write-up
she
in this book. She is the poet of dawn and dusk and thinks about things that are ephemeral beauty, sunsets, flowers, that sort of thing, which is a thing I like just very
Yeah,
artistically. I
my
think it's
my
fun.
favorite thing about Lady Jingxi is that if you look at her anathema, Hei Feng violates
Pretty much all of
99% of them.
them. Yeah.
You can see why things maybe didn't work out so much.
Um, there's a question here about whether the heritage also come with edicts and anathemas or just ancestries. I think,
I believe that the heritages do not,
yeah,
and
because
some of this is space because
but also your
make,
heritage
yeah,
overlays onto your ancestry. So I think
yeah.
there's just an element of that as well. Um, let's see what else do we have here. I was asking a lot about any options. Oh, asking for what we're doing with the Oni. Do the gods have different names in different areas or continents, or how does maybe the presentation of some of the deities differ a little bit from
We don't.
maybe the inner sea?
This we do get into a bit of how gods that are in Avestan as well as Tianxia. We shouldn't call them Avestani gods because they're in both spots, but definitely um, some of the deities that the continents share. We do a little write up on how they are viewed, like especially Abdar is very different. He is not assumed. He's the god of civilization and especially like building walls so that you're not invaded by Mongols every 6 years. Um,
There's
so
a
he's viewed more as a protective god. We've done pictures of him as like a guardian door god from Tian Xia before, but it's not. The wealth is from the prosperity that comes from a stable society that comes from not being invaded by Mongols every 6 years. um,
and then there's an art that I really like of Pharasma's depiction in Tianxia that's a lot more of that, less of a woman with an hourglass and more of that very like King Enma,
yeah,
Judge of the
she's
Dead sort of.
Yeah, very Judge of the Dead, very I'm not comfortable being in the same room as this person. I feel like I am being looked at in a way that I'm not sure is positive. And in some cases we do have different ways to pronounce specific names, like Irori has one mentioned, it's like Ailoli, and Iroshu is another of Rory's nicknames, depending. And likewise, Hei Feng, we pronounce it like that, and Kwanlai sort of pronounces it like that. But if you move into central Tiansha or a lot of the Lunghua regions, it's Hei Feng, um,
A little
which
more
shows
of
up
that.
in yeah, in like pronunciation guides that we have on the sidebars, which I know, like, heads up, we can't include every proper noun. We do not have the space. But
But the ones of
we tried our best to put some of the more critical ones that may not be obvious in the sidebars.
and it's a whole continent, we don't pronounce words the same way on the West Coast and the East Coast of this one country, let alone 26 countries on a fantasy continent with, demons and magic and that kind of thing. So of course it'll drift a bit. Can we get a spoiler for a Tanuki feat? Sure.
We've given you
Given you
already
so
had
many.
one Tanuki spoiler.
I already gave one Tanuki spoiler.
Well, that was the previous stream. I guess we can have a second Tanuki spoiler.
Fine. What's a good one? They have one of their transformations is a false priest form, which I think we've said. It lets you turn into a priest and fake casting some divine spells. But if somebody realizes that you're actually in disguise, your transformation is broken and you turn back, and you are too embarrassed to turn back into that priest form for the rest of the day. You have to sleep on it until your next daily preparations. But it does let you use deception to cast some religious, divine cantrip sort of thing.
I love every single limitation that is on these Tanuki feats that just enforces how much of a giant loser you are. I see somebody asking what the people of Kwanlai call themselves, and I'm gonna guess this is like a spelling thing because it's hard to transliterate. It's Ootoyans. I will put it in the chat.
Yeah, it's Hiromi was talking about it a little bit earlier, just like it's Otoya, and they have their own name for themselves as Otoy. It's that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
so Ootoyan.
Yeah. That's about, maybe we'll call it about there. Thank you so much for coming by, everybody. This is a book that a lot of us spent a lot of time working on. It has a massive number of authors. I know we'd only have 3 on today, but everybody really poured a lot of heart and soul and effort into this giant look. Happy Lunar New Year, everybody. We will be putting out more information in the next couple months. So look forward to the Lost Omens Tian Xia World Guide coming out this April.
And look forward to the fiction that will be showing up on our blog to
Yeah.
support and flesh out this guide.
Oh yeah, we will be
And
having
James,
a
do you
little bit of.
wanna?
Sure, we'll be running a little bit of web fiction to let you know what kind of the days in each of these nations is like. So I think we have about 6 of them that are some cool names you might recognize. The first one will drop next week, so keep an eye on the Paizo blog.
Yep. Do you
Until
wanna tell where you are online, James?
Sure. I mean, I'm on Blue Sky just at James Case. I'd ask Eleanor to say where you can find her, but I know she likes to not be perceived
I
on the
do not,
internet.
but I will re-up my suggestion for you to look at the Gallant Goblin. I am an avid follower of their miniature reviews, and you can get a kobold like this one if you go to their site.
All right. Happy Lunar New Year, everybody.
Happy
Wear
Lunar
red.
New Year!
Wear
Everybody
red. Have
go
a
do
good New
bubble
Year.
tea.